Welcome back to another episode of our month-long Women in STEM series in honor of Women's History Month. I'm Belen Cacho, an ant geneticist and science communicator. Joining us today is the co-host of the critically acclaimed Wildly Curious podcast, Katy Reiss. Katy holds her bachelor's degree in zoo and wildlife biology and a master's in park and resource management. We talk about her lifelong love of nature, work with gorillas and birds of prey, time working with the Little Rock Zoo, being a science communicator, and her special relationship with Lincoln, the cranky great horned owl. Katy, thank you so much for joining us. We got a bonus episode for our Women in Science month. And yeah, we're really, really excited to have you on and talk about your journey in the sciences and the
Yeah,
podcast
absolutely.
and just
Yeah.
just everything. Would you mind giving us an intro on just who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I do a little bit of everything, but for the most part, I'm a science communicator and digital strategist is, I guess, the buzzword that everybody uses with me. But how we ended up meeting was on Blue Sky because I do the Wildly Curious podcast. If you guys haven't checked it out, our YouTube channel just got deleted. I don't know, maybe like 3 weeks ago. So we're still trying to build it back up. Long story, technology. But if you guys could go subscribe to us over there, that'd be great. And then you can literally listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast. We're listening to, I think, like up to like 107 countries now around the world. So that's a lot of fun. It's always weird being like, I don't know, me and then my co-host, we're just like two dweebs having fun talking about science. And we have like a worldwide audience. We're like, man, all these people like listen to us and they like us, but hey, we'll enjoy it. So yeah, I do the podcast. And like you mentioned a few times, I started in zoos. I work for a water utility now, run my own company, do the podcasting. And overall, I just focus on breaking down complex science topics that much like what you do to help people understand them and just, I don't know, trigger curiosity of people. That's something I have severe ADHD since I was a little kid. And so my curiosity has always run wild. And so I just like to kind of give that and bring that to everybody else too.
I love that. When did you what was it that told you, like, experience wise, you're like, I really want to get into the sciences? Like, what was it from an early on?
Oh goodness.
Like, what was
Yeah.
it that triggered that love?
I don't think there was any one thing. I think like most people that work with animals are just like, hey, I've wanted to do this my entire career. And then as you get a little bit older, eventually it starts to be like the not cool thing to do. Because nobody wants to be like, I want to work with animals. But I was always, a chatterbox again, ADHD. And so when I started doing a lot of research, projects and just presentations and stuff, I had a pretty good knack for talking in public, and most people don't like that. So I was like, all right, cool, I'm good with that. Always have been. And so it was just, I don't know, grew up in Western Pennsylvania. I was always the kid that was outside playing with animals, catching snakes and stuff. I'm in Texas now. You wouldn't catch any kid down here grabbing snakes for no reason. But I was that northern kid that never hesitated catching frogs, salamanders, and everything. And so it just kind of blossomed from there. At one point, I mean, I thought about being like a journalist. And so there's always kind of been like this mix of science and storytelling all mixed into one.
That's really cool. What was, as a kid, your favorite
Mhm.
animal?
You know what? That's always a hard question because it always rotates.
Or you
It
can give me
always rotates.
multiple. I had the same issue
I'll,
as a kid and
I'll
as an
have the yeah.
adult, yeah, where I'm like,
Yes,
I
it's too difficult. So I can give you kind of the morphing of the animals here. So again, I'm a millennial, so I definitely hit like a horse girl phase in the 90s. I mean, come on. And so, but as far as like other animals, I definitely went through like this big like harbor seal phase where I
okay.
had like hundreds of harbor seal stuffed animals. Don't know why. Then I went to like wolves. Let's see here. And then after wolves, I went through like marine animals, other marine animals, a variety of sorts. And then I ended up landing on primates. And again, grew up in the woods. And so everybody was like, family wise was like, oh, she's a monkey. Cause I'm normally like up in a tree because I'm just that ADHD kid. And so I kind of, gravitated towards them a little bit more. And then that's what actually I started doing research with Western lowland gorillas in Cleveland Metro Zoo. And it just kind of took off from there.
Wow. Okay. So I'm also, if you haven't noticed on the stream, we jump around a lot because I get very excited.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So so how does one And how did you go into getting to work in a zoo?
Mhm.
What could that was that in high school? Was that in college? Like, how does one actually get started with that? And then could you
Yeah.
tell us about working with gorillas? Like, that's
Yeah.
just so cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I was on the research side of it. So how I started all of this was, again, it was just general interest. And if there's anybody listening that either you guys are interested or you have kids or family, because everybody's like eventually know some kid that's interested in working in zoos, have them start volunteering with like humane shelters and local shelters right now. It doesn't matter if they're scrubbing the floors, walking dogs, whatever. And then I had my undergraduate degree in zoo and wildlife biology. And then through that, I ended up, and that was in Ohio, and that ended up having an amazing partnership with Akron Zoo and Cleveland Zoo. And that's whenever I started doing the gorilla research with, I mean, pretty much who's, I mean, at least I consider her like the Diane Fossey of like today's world is Dr. Lucas. And she's phenomenal. And she's one of the best like gorilla researchers in the world today.
So
And
that
so,
degree, so is that something that you I guess I didn't realize that like a degree was what you needed to be able to go into that because a lot of the times like when we hear like with in zoos like it's a lot of that volunteer driven component of it
mhm.
and it's really cool to hear that there are specialized like degrees that you can get. I assume that's like certain schools are better than others, right, for the connection to it. How did you end
Yes
up
and no.
how I guess how did you end up choosing that major? Um like, did you have any struggles in order to in choosing that, or was it always really encouraging? Because, like you kind of
Oh,
mentioned,
yeah. No, I struggled.
well, because like even
Yeah,
like one thing you alluded to is eventually people are told like, oh, stop playing with animals.
yeah,
And like it's all a
absolutely.
dream that we all have. So like, what was it like for you like to be able to actually chase that dream and go after it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun, and I mean, for me, as far as like the degree stuff, I mean, nowadays most zoos require a degree of some sort, as
Okay,
long as you're not going to be like a part timer. I mean, and honestly, most zookeepers are degree holding. Most of them have a bachelor's of biology and something related, which is awesome and also sad because one, they don't get paid a lot because nobody is in the zoo field for the money.
right.
You're definitely it's definitely a passion field for sure, but there's so much knowledge that these keepers have, and the pay is horrible. So it's definitely not like a fair trade off. But some of the keepers that I've run into are some of the most intelligent individuals that I've ever met. And I ended up not going into the keeper route because once I started doing the research, and yes, you have like most animal people are animal people. They are not people. And so in walks ADHD Katie, and I have no problems talking in front of crowds because I could just turn that. I just have never had that fear. Side of my brain just doesn't exist, I guess. It just has never bothered me. And so whenever I started doing the research and stuff, I had the opportunity to do like go the more traditional, like be a zookeeper and stuff. But whenever I was on the research side of things, and I started doing some presentations, I jokingly like to say I got stuck because once you become pretty good at something, then that kind of just propels you for the rest of your life. And that's what happened. Like once I started going into conservation education and going around and talking and presenting, then I was like, all right, this is actually a lot of fun because I still get to take care of the animals. And I bounced from primates and gorillas and things very quickly into birds of prey just because of the conservation education, because you those are primarily the animals that you can take out about to schools and everything. And so I very quickly took that path and ended up doing all kinds of programs with birds and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. Anything from peregrine falcons, little screech owls, all the way up to bald eagles and Moluccan cockatoos, all kinds of things.
Really cool and a huge jump between primates to the birds, I would
It
imagine.
is. It is.
What's the process like once you've gotten this, you've gotten the degree and now you're looking for a lab to work in? Is that analogous to like identifying zoos based on that are doing research based on an animal that you're interested in, or how does that process entail?
For me at the time, it's all networking. It's all who you know. And zoos is a very, once you're in it, then you know, for the most part, you know everybody, or you at least know the who's who's. And so once you start to have those connections, and so again, I kind of lucked out the school that I chose. Well, I did my research into it. The school I chose, Malone University, they don't have as strong as a zoo and wildlife biology program as they once did. My professor has since moved universities, but whenever I was there, like I said, we had a really strong partnership with Cleveland Zoo. And so that kind of just like took off, and I started going to conferences, and that just started networking. And then whenever I got married, my ex-husband, well, now ex-husband, he was Air Force. And so we kind of, jumped around. So I don't want to say I kind of had a choice on where I went, because we didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was like, thankfully everywhere we went, I ended up being near a zoo. And so I was able to be close enough to something that I could apply. I did a short stint. When I moved from up north down to south here, down to Arkansas was the first one we were at down here. I took a short stint with Arkansas Game and Fish. No offense to any Arkansans here, but like I lasted a few weeks, and when I showed up my day one on the job, this big dude in overalls named Bo came up, and he's like, "I'm going to be here to show you, how to do the job." And I'm like, "Oh, what did I get myself into?" And so I lasted there like literally like 2-3 weeks. And then I got a call from Little Rock Zoo. It was like, "Hey, we got an opening for an educator." I was like, "I'll take it. Like I will do whatever I can to be there, and I will take it." Yeah.
What did Bo show you to do?
So that job would have really been cool, but I'm also 5'1", and we would, hook up a huge aquarium onto the back of a pickup truck and then drive it all around Arkansas and teach kids about local fish, which is really neat.
That's really cool.
No, it's really cool because it's like a 500-gallon like fish tank. Like it's a huge, huge tank. And but I'm also 5'1", and so the trucks that we had to drive that were older, like didn't exactly have like power seating. So, and I'm a very good driver, but I was just like, man, I'm eventually gonna hit something. Like
Oh,
I can't see, I can't. So whenever I took then the Little Rock Zoo job, and they're like, "Hey, how do you feel about driving larger vehicles?" I'm like, "Okay, I just left that other job." I was like, "What kind of vehicles are we talking about here?" And they're like, 15 passengers van. I'm like, "I'm on it. That I can do, no problem. As long as I can see and everybody's safe, we're good."
it's a
So yeah, it was.
really that's a really cool just like outreach program as well to like
Mhm.
drive
Oh yeah,
around like a tank on wheels because like
with
that's
fish in
bring
the back, mind you.
yeah like that's
Yeah,
not because like I've heard about like like in schools animals visiting like you have your
yeah,
ambassador animals but
yep.
I mean it makes
Fish,
sense
a whole
ambassador
tank.
fish but like
Yeah.
whoa that's so
And we would
cool.
have to, and again, I wasn't there for very long, but we would have to, rotate the fish and everything. And so you would have the fish farm wherever they would, end up collecting fish and then taking them out to the lakes and things in Arkansas. And they were raising them there. And so you would have to go and like catch your fish as they're running and then like chuck it in the tank. And then that's what we would take out that day. So of course, like oddly enough, we had our favorite fish that was like, this one's always very active, and like net it and then like throw it in the tank. And yeah, so it was definitely interesting and unique for sure.
Oh, I get the favorite fish. I had a favorite
Right?
ant out of a like
There you go.
in a colony with 10,000 ants. There was one I could pick out because she had a black spot on the back of her head due to like during development injury. And
Uh-huh.
she always came out, and I know she wasn't saying hello, but I like to pretend that she was saying
But
hello.
yeah,
She was more angry
yeah,
that I was going in the nest, and she was the first line of defense. But I'm
yeah.
like, that's my friend ant right there.
Right?
So gorilla research.
Yeah.
What what is a research center at a zoo even look like for those of us that, are
Hmm.
used to like being in a molecular lab at a university where it's like a bench
Yeah.
top? What is it like in a zoo laboratory and how is it working with a gorilla?
It was a lot of fun. And I will give you that. Like it was neat. Part of me wishes I would have stayed in that, but as you can imagine, that is such a niche like job line that it's just like good grief. And especially whenever you're so young and you need something that pays. But it was neat. It's a lot of observations. It's a lot of watching. What she was specializing was watching heart disease within male gorillas within zoo populations, because they do, zoos get a lot of, knock for being like animals in captivity and stuff. I will be the first one to tell you guys, at least at Little Rock Zoo for sure, we had male gorillas who like were so picky that if you didn't bring like their food to them on literally a silver platter with like what they wanted, they would like stay up in their hammock and they're like, "No, thank you." If it was too hot outside, they're like, "No, thank you. I'm not going out there. I'm going to stay in here at the AC." So in Cleveland, it was a lot of observational research, a lot of blood draws with like the vet staff to be able to check cholesterol levels and things like that. Because unfortunately, I mean, just like human males, cholesterol issues and things like that. And so within the population within zoos, they typically have high cholesterol, and so she's trying to monitor that and trying to and help them. I mean, because it is a little bit higher within male populations within zoos than what we see out. And so just trying to fix that. Like, is it diet? Is it just exercise? It's obviously a combination of things, but how can we better, the population that we have in zoos? Because contrary to what most people think, we can't just, release all the animals back into the wild. That's just, we hear that all the time in zoos. And it's like, nope, you guys, like, they can't do that. Like, these animals at this point, at least in any AZA accredited zoo, Association of Zoos and Aquarium, you go through all sorts of testing, and it's a whole big process every few years to be accredited. And any zoo like that is going to spoil the heck out of the animals. I mean, we have enrichment, it's no hands on contact. Those animals would have no idea what to do if they were in the wild, like, no clue. And so, with that, with the gorilla stuff, again, it was neat because you do start to gain like their personalities and see like their different personality traits, who likes what. Even though at Little Rock, even though we weren't like we had one of the oldest gorilla females in captivity in Little Rock, and like her favorite thing was peanut butter sandwiches. Like, she would do anything for a peanut butter sandwich, not jelly, just peanut butter, because it has too much sugar, and so you have to keep them on a healthy diet. But yeah, I mean, their behaviors are so unique. We had another male gorilla that was at one of the zoos I was at, that he loved whenever, like, his observation glass was probably, I don't know, a foot and a half off the grass, or off the ground, but then in his enclosure it went down maybe like 5 feet or so, and so that he could like hide down there, and then he would like bounce up and hit his arms up against the glass. And we as staff were always like, oh no, you scared us, and like make a big deal. Then he runs away like thumping his chest because he thinks it's hilarious because he just scared all these people. And so they do have quite a sense of humor. I mean, and they're intelligent. So I mean, you definitely do pick up on their personalities. They definitely pick up on your personality and who you are. And they know, is this person going to come up and interact with me? And as a researcher, you're like trying not to, but at the same time, at least when I was doing that project, there wasn't like any harm done by us interacting in them. So you can go up and like show them like a trading card on the glass, or like show them something on your cell phone, and they immediately come over. They're like, oh, this is amazing. Because it's like a kid, they're like, this is cool. Like, I've never seen this before. So you definitely see a lot of really cool, different personalities and stuff with them. And again, some are just grump butts and want nothing to do with you, and other ones are very, very friendly and very sociable.
What goes into observational data collection? So again, it's just something that from the community standpoint, we've had on researchers that'll do like
Mhm.
genetics on a fruit fly, right? And that's like the observational behavioral studies there are like video cameras and like very set types of
Mhm.
behavior. But like what kind of observational studies are you able to do on a gorilla? And like what are you like what is your standard of recording? Like how does that data collection work?
It all depends on what like the primary researcher. And so there, like at the time, I was like a student assistant, whatever. And so she would literally like hand me the paperwork and be like, "Hey, here are the behaviors you're looking at." At least for one of them, I was doing like, "Here's the behaviors you're looking for," and literally just sit there. And every time somebody does one of these four things, like check off who it is, how long they did it for, and and anything else. And so it's literally just sitting there, a whole lot of waiting. Because I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a zoo. If they don't have an enrichment or something going on, I mean, they're just sitting, hanging out, and chilling too. And that's ended up being a lot of what it was just they were chilling, and then all of a sudden they would like do something amazing. We're like, all right, cool. We're like, record it, write it all down, doing all the check notes, and then a whole lot of sitting again. We're like, okay. And it's those times where we don't, if we were doing anything behavioral like that, that's whenever we don't want to be showing them something on a phone or showing them a playing card or something like that, because we want them to just kind of like do their thing. But again, if it was just like, hey, this one is just, came out from anesthesia, yesterday, it looks like he has like an upset belly. Can you kind of just watch him for a little bit? It's like, sure, I'll be a gorilla babysitter. Like, and again, they could have very well been like, we don't know what else to do with you because you're always here. Like, can you just go like watch that? And I would have been like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll go watch that gorilla. Like, it didn't bother me. So, but it was a lot of fun.
Is the way that you standardize those kinds of experiments difficult? Because I can imagine that the behaviors could be a little subjective. Like you watching a
Oh,
certain
yeah.
gorilla, like you can get used to their nuances, and so like this guy is doing this behavior, even though it might not quite look like to someone who's not trained on that particular gorilla? And if
Yeah.
so, what how does that influence the data collection? Like, does it make it harder to interpret, or is it really it's good enough for what you need it to be?
I mean, and again, I think it depended on what she was having us do. And sometimes, I mean, she was as awesome as she was also very big on like bias. All right, guys, she's like, here, you have to look at it through a lens of just what it is. Don't try to it's not interpreting anything that she was having us mark off was a very black and white behavior. So it wasn't anything like, are they playing? Because that's all, in the eye of the beholder. You don't know. And so it was just like, do they go and grab this red ball? And so it was a lot more like yes and no, black and white, to kind of keep out any of that bias in there. So and a lot of that was on her, and what she was particularly looking for. Again, she was great at what she does. I mean, she's still doing all kinds of research. But yeah, a lot of it was just what she was asking. And then us that was trained to just not not looking into anything. Like we had to keep it black and white, because if we did write something down, again, that was like whenever we would take the notes on there, if we would write something down, she would call us out on it in all the best way. I mean, that's why everybody that studied under her did such a good job. It was because she did call us out and was like, nope, here's why this is wrong. You can't say that, this is interpretation, and here's why. And so that definitely came in handy later on with that mindset, because then as I started going up through the ranks, I guess for lack of a better term, within zoos, up into like manager positions and things like that, whenever you're looking even birds of prey, and you have to make a tough call, like do we have to euthanize this animal because of a quality of life issue? You love that animal. I mean, you could have worked with them for 10, 15 years, but if their cartilage in their knees are pretty much non-existent at this point, you have to be able to kind of put all your feelings and all that kind of stuff aside to make a good judgment call on the animal's behalf. And so it definitely came into play later on of like, hey, what she taught us back then was definitely handy for down the road.
It sounds like it's really good science. Like
Oh
like
yeah.
like like you're taking it like you're saying you're taking away the bias. 'Cause, even in fruit fly research, like, in the before time, before you could do the
Uh-huh.
automation, you'd be looking at a dish, at a fly, and seeing like, "Okay, is it fighting?" And like you said,
Yeah.
like, the term "fighting" is as loaded as the
It's
term
it
"playing."
is.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's really
Yep.
cool that, like, that training that you got was, like, so regimented, and it's
Yes.
just like, yeah, you really are making the best of what you can in that scenario, and that's super, super cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
one thing that you mentioned, while we were talking about the gorillas was the accreditation that goes into the zoos,
Hmm.
and, like,
Oh
what
yeah.
the could you just for those maybe who aren't aware, what goes into that? Like, why is this accrediting body
Holy
important?
cow.
And, like
Yeah.
and what does it go into it?
There is so much that goes into it. And if you don't pass, I'll just say this right now, like if they don't pass, you're tabled. You get a second chance to like correct the things, and then if you don't, then your accreditation is yanked. So what most people don't know is that any AZA accredited zoo, the animals within their zoo, they don't own those animals. It's in the accreditation, so the AZA that owns them technically, and that's for breeding purposes, because they want to be able to move animals around, look at all the genetic pools. They have literally whole like breeding groups that just like for gorillas, for instance, that literally open up a book and say, here's all their genetics. We need to move this gorilla over here because she needs, have looking to breed to have a baby to increase the population, diversity. He needs to move from here over to there. And I mean, gorillas, any kind of ape is super complex, because then you do have to sort of look at personalities and things. But if you lose that accreditation, your animals are gone. And so you're essentially out of business at that point. So what goes into that? Goodness, it's anything from cleaning to signage. Are your signage educational? Are your programs done effectively? Does every animal there have an enrichment program? Even like reptiles and stuff. Like nowadays, that used to be a thing of the past, that like you don't have to have enrichment for snakes. Not anymore. Like you have to have puzzle feeders and things like that, similar to what you would give a dog. Like there's different things you can do for reptiles and everything. So do you have enrichment? Do you have training plans for all your animals? And that's especially with any of the mammals. Like we have to, again, it's all hands off because they're wild animals within a zoo. But like, does a rhino present its hip for a blood draw? Does a gorilla present its shoulder for a shot? And so there's a lot of training, and you need training plans for all that. Are the exhibits clean? Do all the systems work? Like we had like penguins was under my group whenever I was a program coordinator, and we had African black-footed penguins, jackass penguins, and part of that was like an ozone building. And it's like, do all the alarms work? Because if there's a leak, like you're in trouble. Like, do you have all your scuba equipment up to par? Are all your people that are cleaning the tank, are they all scuba certified? And so there's so much that goes into it. It's a huge process. And I went through the accreditation process. The biggest one I was from start to finish was with Little Rock. And unfortunately we had gotten tabled there for a bunch of like minor things. And then our education curator had left. And so then I was put in charge as interim then. And I'm like, oh, and this was like, I don't know, a week before the walkthrough of like, are we going to be shut down? Is everybody going to kind of lose their job thing? And then they're like, you're in charge. I'm like, awesome. but I, but I killed it. But I killed it. Again, it's a personality thing, for me anyway. And so it's a huge walkthrough. But I mean, it's like, I mean, we even went through, we replaced signage, we, updated signage, we wiped everything down. I mean, it has to be clean, it has to be spotless, everything has to work. Like you can't have a wobbly step. And then these are things that, they come through, like I said, every few years. It's every 4 years, but then, you start really honing in on making sure pretty much every 3 years. And it's just stuff that they keep you on your toes because you want to have a good facility. Because again, zoos used to be looked at as, just entertainment factors, and that's not the case anymore. There's a lot of research that goes on in zoos. So much fundraising for conservation efforts that come out and from zoos and things. And so AZA really does a fantastic job of making sure that everybody is keeping up to a high standard that we are. So
One really cool part that you mentioned that I didn't even realize that was needed for these is the
mhm.
educational value and the signage. Like,
Oh
that
yeah.
seems like it's a really, really progressive part of, again, like you said, it's not
Oh
just
my goodness.
entertainment, like, that
Yeah.
could you go into a little bit, like, what is appropriate signage that you would
Yeah.
need for, like, I have a zoo animal here, I just got him.
Yes.
I got a Red River
Yeah.
hog in. What do I need in terms of signage to have that exhibit accredited?
Oh my goodness. All right. So there is actually a whole background of like exhibit science of from the people and then also from the animal perspective. So depending on the animal perspective, there's going to be certain things that's the keeper. Whenever I was at Little Rock Zoo, I was also the visitor experience manager, and so I actually oversaw on the human side, how do we make this like the best, because you want people to stay at certain exhibits for a certain amount of time,
Mhm.
but then you want them to kind of move along quickly. I mean, in Disney World has this stuff down pat with all the wristbands that they use that don't track anybody, but it definitely pings your location so they can kind of see traffic and everything. And they have people moving throughout like areas. So if you kind of look at that as a different exhibit, you want people to be able to move through. And so you want people to be able to look at the signage, but you can't have them, lingering around. You can't have too much, verbiage on the sign or nobody's going to read it, but you can't have too little or else you're going to have, people with a ton of questions, which great. We love people who have questions, but you don't want to frustrate your customers either. And so there's definitely like a weights and balances there. And so for us, we had, when I first took over that position, had to standardize like all the signage. And so it was like, updating any scientific names because those change out the wazoo all the time. And
Yep.
so it's making sure those are up to date, making sure we have accurate pictures because, again, there's some subspecies and then things change. You can have a subspecies and then all of a sudden they're like, nope, that's actually a whole other type of animal now. Or like, great.
Or like
Um,
giraffes, right? In zoos where
yep.
it was they were all the subspecies were interbred, and then now it's like
Yes.
there's the 4 different I imagine that would have been a really big headache.
Yes, no, exactly. And so it's like making sure that all that stuff is accurate, and then just making sure that the level of information that's there is going to be interesting for anybody of any age. You want it to
Mhm.
be a fourth-ish grade reading level, if not a little bit lower. So you want it to be interesting information, but it can't be boring, but it also can't be too complex. So it's just hitting a lot of those sweet spots. And then also, I mean, even as you're walking through zoos and you're going down through, you want to have like your signage within eyesight. So it kind of draws people like down a path. And so there's a lot of sociology that goes on behind it too, understanding human behavior on how do I get them from this spot over here to having them have shade so they can have, a rest a little bit. and then, okay, here's a bathroom over here, and let's draw them into this, bathroom area here. But then again, you're still a business because that's how you make, money to take care of all the animals. So we also have to make sure they swing by the gift shop and the restaurants and all that kind of stuff too. And so there's a lot of human behavior and science that goes on even at that level too.
I love you dissecting this because like it all makes sense, but I've never thought about it. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
So like next time I
Yeah.
go to a zoo, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna look for all this.
Yeah.
We had a question from the chat, and just because you mentioned it, what is the most popular item at a gift shop? Like, what is if
Oh
you could
goodness.
stock it with like one or two items that you know are gonna be big selling, what is that gonna be?
It honestly changes. It's definitely seasonal. It's definitely trends. Just like kids, I'm trying to think at Little Rock. There were a few things that we had that were just like dumb, like gummy toys. Cause you also have to think too, even though you want people to hit that gift shop on the way out for the most part, there are still a lot of zoos that have gift shops within it. So anything you have there, you have to think of the animals because kids chucking stuff into exhibits and
Oh,
things. And
oh,
so, yeah, so there has to be like a balance of like, okay, here's the stuff at the gift shops we have within the zoo itself. We have to realize that everything in here could be chucked into an exhibit. It's all going to be a choking hazard, but it's definitely like, again, a balance of, hey, maybe this will work, maybe this won't work. And kids are weird. I have a kid; he's also weird. And so sometimes the things that they latch onto at the gift shop, we'd be like, I don't know why this is popular, but let's like buy more of it. And then like all of a sudden, like all the kids like on all the field trips clean us out. And so we as parents, the parents that were there, we would all kind of be like, okay, hey, fidget spinners are trending with our kid. Can we get animal print fidget spinners in? They're like, yep. We're like, boom, get those in. And so it's just, again, paying attention to the trends of kids, and it definitely changes.
so like the sociology side of things again, but now not just with the adult patrons, but the kids who will be wanting
Oh
stuff.
my goodness. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really cool. My
Yeah.
daughter's too, and we're in the plushie stage right now, and so
Oh
that's
my goodness. Yeah.
the animal figurines, whether it be dinosaurs
Yes.
or other animals, that's what we're really into right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and those, I mean, and again, I feel like those are staples at any gift shop that you go to.
Yeah.
And then anything else is like the fluff pieces. I know at Little Rock and then Pittsburgh Zoo, we did it too, or the National Aviary, we did it too. Is we would get like local artists that would, submit their artwork or like little jewelry and things like that, that would be, based in the zoo. And then they would get a portion of it back, or they were donating a portion to conservation. So we're like, heck yeah, we'll support that. And so we really tried to, shop local. I mean, even as a zoo too. So it was pretty cool.
It's Katie, I hope it's impressed upon the audience that how well versed you are in the world. Right, going from like researching something as niche as a gorilla to now like running essentially a business that needs to make money but also conserve animals. Like,
Yeah.
ma'am, you are a grade A badass. I hope
I
that
mean,
that comes across
if
to the
I
chat.
could, if I could, again, ADHD superpower. I mean, and that's what like I tell my son all the time. I'm like, pattern recognition is my jam. Like, and so that is my ADHD where it kicks in. Besides like the, presenting and talking to people, it's a pattern recognition. And so for me, it's very easy to see just how even, and again, if I could contract myself out and just go around to zoos and help zoos like better their a visitor experience, I totally would, because like I can literally look at a crowd, and the only way I can really compare it is like if you guys have ever been canoeing down a river, all right, or kayaking down a river, and how you read the river and how you can kind of tell like, okay, if we go over to the right, we're not going to bottom out in a canoe, or if we go to the left, we're probably going to hit some rapids, but there's a rip current, like the little rips that are under there that can pull you under. We're like, we got to avoid that. And so it's kind of, for me, it's kind of like the same thing, that I can look at a crowd and just have a gut reaction of something's not right there. Like, let's move it over here. Let's do this and do this. And so thankfully, because I moved up so quickly within zoos, I kind of had like my own little playground, especially at Little Rock, where I can kind of maneuver, and I had a lot of freedom there. My director and assistant director, whenever I was there, they were great, and they gave me a lot of freedom to be like, yeah, go ahead and do that. But I mean, a lot of that too comes with bringing in money, and so we had to lead, fundraising campaigns. I had to, schmooze and bring birds and stuff up to people to be like, hey, you think this bird is cool? I'll let you take a picture with it if you donate to my new conservation education building, kind of thing. And so, yeah, there's just a huge variety of things. And so a lot of folks within zoos are definitely jack of all trades because you have to be.
Yeah. You mentioned too that you were moving up the rungs of the ladder, like
Hmm.
after working with the gorillas, what were some of the next steps that you took, and what were other animals that you researched? Like I know you mentioned the birds of prey that I love to hear
Yeah.
about, but like what were other ones, and like how does that moving up the rungs look like in the zoo world?
Hard. And it is a lot of just taking opportunities as they come to you and just not hesitating to say like, yeah, sure. Like I never thought about working with birds of prey until whenever I was, let me think here. When I was in high school, I got a scholarship to go to South Africa to travel over there for
Wow.
like an ambassador program. And one of the guys who interviewed me was a big shot lawyer in Pittsburgh, and he knew the head of research at the aviary, the National Aviary in Pittsburgh. And so when he found out, a few years later that I was going to school for zoo and wildlife biology, he was like, "Hey, I know this other guy, Dr. Todd Katzner, and he's like, he does all this peregrine and he does research with golden eagles and all the cool things. It's like, meet up with him." And I was like, sure. And so I met with him and his team, and then I started doing helping with the research that was going on with peregrine falcons within Pittsburgh and the city of Pittsburgh because they nest in the buildings and things. And I was like, this is so much cooler. And birds of prey too, especially in like a rehab setting and stuff. You can be hands on with the animals. You do get to fly them and things like that. I mean, falconry is a sport, and so you can fly them, you can train. It's a lot more hands on. Whereas gorillas, it was awesome. I loved it. I mean, that was like where like, and even now, like orangutans, gorillas, that's still like a passion, one of my favorite animals. But being able to be a little bit more hands on with the birds of prey and just like the power and the speed and all their flight, I was like, this is really cool. And so I made that jump, and wasn't really something that I was expecting, but that was all like, hey, I'm just going to show up. Like I was going to school in Ohio, and then the national aviary team, like whenever they would be doing research on birds, or there was a big research site with songbirds that was out, I was 3 hours from home, but back where I lived at home, they had a research site out there. And so they were like, hey, we go out here and we collect, grab up songbirds, we put bands on, we do studies and sites and census counts and everything. They're like, if you're ever out there, I'm like, yep, just call me, let me know. And so it's just a lot of like taking volunteer opportunities of once you start to get your foot in the door, if somebody says, hey, do you want to? Just, yeah. Like, yeah, I'm there. I'm going to help you. Like it doesn't matter what, I'll be there to help you.
So it's a
So yeah.
very big passion pursuit that's not
Oh yeah.
like you said, like the first thing you said was it's hard. And it sounds
Yeah.
like it's one of those things that you have to be really, really committed to, and you have to really love it in order to be
Stubborn.
able to
Yeah.
do that. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, you
absolutely.
you have to you have definitely have to be stubborn. And I mean, I've seen, and I mean, like I'm not in zoos like anymore, and that was simply because one, pay, like I have bills, and that was really what launched me off into the podcasting and everything, because I was like, my niche was truly science communication. I love doing all the hands-on stuff. I loved working with the birds of prey and everything, but that was really my niche and what I was good at. And so whenever I had to step away from zoos just because of us, moving and everything, and again, financial, you don't make a whole lot of money, but it ended up being one of those things that it worked out. And so I still am very close with, I mean, everybody. If not, I think my network now is even bigger than what I had whenever I was within zoos, because now I travel as a keynote speaker, the podcast. I end up like opening up so many different doors that way. And my personal podcast, I produce a few others, but my personal podcast, the Wildly Curious one, that straight up started because a friend of mine and we went to college together. I brought her down to work with me at a zoo because I needed a lead educator, somebody I could trust, because we were getting ready for their accreditation process and everything. I was like, dude, I need somebody down here to help me. And so I ended up bringing her down, and from working from there, and then we talked about how funny it would be, we should have a podcast where we're just kind of talking about all the insane things we hear and see in zoos, and like because people just don't know, and it's just like funny stories and everything. We're like, we should do that. Okay, cool. And then we all ended up parting ways and leaving and going to other zoos and things like that. And then it was maybe a couple years after I left the zoo world, she works at a nature center now, And I just called her one day. I was like, dude, I just miss talking to you because we went to college together. Then, 6 years or so after, ended up, working together. We saw each other every day. I was like, dude, I just miss talking to you. So then we started doing the podcast over, mutual, hey, we're both science communicators, or always have been. Let's just do this podcast thing. And so that's how we kind of scratch that itch now. But again, I was just like, let's just do this and see where it goes. And 4 years later, here we are. And that's opened up way more doors than what I expected.
Can you tell us a little bit about the podcast? Like, is it still focused on fun zoo stories, or how do you select a story that you think people will be interested in?
So we just focus on anything. And so we say right now, it's a podcast that tells you everything you want to know about nature and probably more than, or everything you need to know about nature and probably more than you wanted to know. Sorry, that intro part's Laura's, not mine. I just say, and I'm Katie. And then I say what we're talking about that day. Laura has the tongue twister. But we pick a different theme for every week. So we have a season, which is 12 weeks long. And then we pick out what those 12 topics that we want to do for that season. We record them. We bring on the guests, whoever we want. And then most of them we do it blind. So we have a topic and then we send our ideas of specific things. So let me think here. Like one we did recently, freshwater freaks. We did one on, animals we found in freshwater. And so I pick, 3 freshwater freaks that I want to talk about. Laura picks 3 that she wants to talk about. We send them to a mutual person between us, make sure that we don't overlap anything. And then once we get the thumbs up and the green light, then we that's whenever we record that episode. So we have no idea like what the other one's coming in with. Like, and I know Laura well enough, like sometimes if there's an opportunity to bring up a big cat or a bear, Laura's going to bring up a big cat or a bear. And so there's things that we just kind of know each other. So I typically don't talk or pick a big cat or a bear because I know chances are Laura's going to talk about it. But then we've done some other like funny episodes. Like we have this Could You series. So one of the things that was always talked about in zoos, I'm going to stress this right now, it's always hypothetical. But one thing we always said was like, do you think you could ride that animal? And that was constant. And it's like personality because it's like, okay, yeah, I could ride. I don't think I could ride a rhino, but like that rhino is basically a big dog. I could totally ride that rhino. And so that was kind of like a running joke. And so we have a whole episode on just Laura and I picking the animals and what we think we could ride, why we think we could ride it. And then, but we talk about like the science and stuff. So yeah, it's like funny, but then we're also educating about like the animals. And that whole could you ended up being like, could you fight that? Which is still, I go back and I listen to that episode and I laugh so hard at the could you fight that? Because I had other people that were around me that had listened to the podcast pick the animals that they think I should fight. And it ended up being like a coworker of mine who just wanted to see me get beat up by animals. And then like my son who thinks I'm basically super mom, who he's like, just throat chop a camel, mom. You could totally do it. I'm like, I can't throat chop a camel, man. So it was just like escalated. When Laura had her baby, we did like a tribute to babies, but we did it ugly animal babies, and so we each picked like some of the world's like ugliest animal babies. And there's some one-liners in there that I can't listen to it without like tears in my eyes laughing. And that's kind of like the benefit of recording and doing something you love with a friend, somebody that we've known for years, is that our banter back and forth. It's just normally she says something that my brain just takes wildly inappropriate and I don't say anything. I just laugh. And then Laura already knows where I'm going and she just starts laughing. And then it's like off to the races from there that we just like can't stop laughing about stuff. So we definitely have a lot of fun with it.
I love that you can, like, you're making it accessible, right? Like something like, oh,
Yeah.
which animal that I could fight or which animal could ride, but really behind that is a whole bunch of science
Oh
that you
yeah.
could go into, and it's like it makes it
Yep.
approachable, it makes it accessible. What
Yep.
about doing the podcast for you is the most rewarding aspect of it? Like why science communication? What about it drives you?
So for me, I mean, and the prime example is we have a young listener and she's pretty much been, I mean, and again, and that is like a completely organic. So we didn't know her parents, nothing. And she was in the middle of a big move. I believe it was from New York they were moving back home. She had severe social anxiety. And Laura and I are very transparent on the podcast that we're just like, yeah, we're just nature nerds. Like we're just a bunch of dorks having fun. Like Yeah, I mean, people will see me out and about like downtown here in Texas and stuff, and I could, be out at a retirement party, be out with friends for the night, and I'll be in a cocktail dress, all dressed up. And then meanwhile, I have to run home and record me laughing my butt off, about nerd stuff, with my co-host. And so it's definitely like this duality. And we're very transparent about that on the podcast. And so this one young listener in her mood with severe, severe social anxiety, and her mom was really struggling with it too. Somehow they stumbled across our podcast, and she started listening to it, and she just related to us. She was just like, I think these two are really funny. And she was little at the time. And again, I kind of compare it to like dinosaurs, like Disney's dinosaurs. Whenever you're a kid, you don't really catch on to some of that humor because it's not like Laura and I, we don't really lay it on, super thick, but there's still some things that we're like we do talk about, sex in a couple episodes from a biology standpoint.
Yep.
So there's educational aspects to it. But she was probably pretty young to be listening to some of the episodes, but she related to it, us, and she was the first one. She started sending us like hand drawn fan mail of just like the funniest things. There's one that Laura talked about in our nature news, which is like before we do our episode, we talk about in nature news we have, and there was about Laura's talking about how scientists get out of hand, and so they were seeing how hard you had to slap a chicken, like a chicken breast, before you could cook it, like how much it would have to heat up and everything. And so there's like the Slappinator, like 3000 or whatever it was. And like I was laughing so hard, but this very young listener, she ended up like drawing, and I have it. It's one of my favorite things. She drew like this, like chicken breast with like a hand smacking it, and I died. And so like her mom, reached out to us and told us like, she's doing a lot better now where she is. She's really come out of her shell, and it's because like she related to, hey, there's other people like me. Like there's other weird, cool people like me. And it's whenever we hear stories like that, and she's, 4 years older now than whenever she first started listening, and just seeing how she's grown and how she's come out of her shell and how she's blossomed into this insanely talented artist that also still loves animals, loves wildlife, still listens to our show. Her mom always reaches out if she has questions or anything like that. She is the coolest kid. And so just making an impact like that for us. Again, I made the joke about how Laura and I are always fascinated. Like we're, 107 counting countries around the world that we're just like, good grief, like all these people listening to us. But it's like whenever we hear those little one-off things that we've helped like her come out of her shell, because she's like, okay, I know, like she's like, I know I'm weird, but I don't feel like anybody else relates to me. We're like, no, dude, we're totally nerds too. Like we've got your back on this one. Because you're a kid, you don't realize that, yeah, there's other people just like me out there. And so us opening that door for her and just being able to relate, and we had no idea who she was for the longest time. She just listened to us, and then eventually her mom reached out and was just like, hey, I just want to tell you about my kid real quick, not expecting us to answer back. And Laura and I are both like, oh my goodness, like this is the coolest. And she's just an all-around cool kid. Like for her being, feeling like an outcast and everything, no, this kid is so cool. Like she's way cooler than I ever was at that age, which is like her own personal style, how she identifies like herself with her style and what she loves. Such a cool kid. And so that definitely was something that keeps us going for sure.
And that's kind of what you had started off our discussion with too, is that like that love of animals and like conservation
Hmm.
and biology is almost not encouraged after a certain age. So if you're a little
Hmm.
kid and you do have this love, it's not that her mom didn't say like you shouldn't be into this, but you just don't see it
Yep.
around you. So it's like
Yep.
you're kind of highlighting, and it's sad to say, right, but almost normalizing a love of science and a love
Yeah.
of nature,
Absolutely.
and that has
Yeah.
to be like the takeaway to it.
Yeah.
It-
Absolutely. And it's just the curiosity aspect behind it. Cause I mean, I even see it with my own son. He's again also ADHD, and he's in third grade, and his science teacher, God bless her soul, but she's like, he asks so many questions. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, that's my fault. Like that's my doing. But in a school setting anymore nowadays, it's like this is what you're taught. You need to learn this information, and that's it. And then again, you can't blame a kid whenever they come home, they don't want to learn other random things because they've just done a ton of learning. And so that's why I love what I do, even working at the water utilities, the informal education side of things, within zoos, within the water utility, within anything, because I get to be the fun one and make sure they're learning in a fun way. So yeah, we don't want it to be like textbooks. We don't want them to have to memorize it. we want them to feel like the learning is just fun and natural. So we definitely put a lot of work into it. Laura and I are both certified heritage interpreters, and so there's a lot of science that goes on behind each of our episodes that we do. Again, it's the human aspect of it, the behavior aspect of it, of you don't want to fact spit, you don't want to, XYZ. Sam Ham is like one of the gods of modern day, natural heritage interpretation, and so there's a whole bunch of science that goes onto there. Is like, how do you make facts and things interesting for people to naturally remember so it doesn't feel like learning? And so it's definitely that. And I try to bring that out even with my own son, and being able to get that through to somebody over a podcast that we never have seen or met in person is definitely was definitely different for Laura and I, but also really, really fun.
Yeah, I really connect with y'all on the question side of things. When I was in middle and elementary school, I had a class where they made the Bulent rule because I asked too many derailing questions, and it was
Yep.
the rule. They was called me out. Like, here's the rule that there is no off-topic question allowed anymore. And so
Yep.
it really wrecked me for
It
asking
kills
questions
you.
for a long
It
time
does.
because like
It really does.
it's your curiosity is kind of driven down, and it's really cool that you have this like show and outlet where you can drive that curiosity.
Yep.
We had a question of what exactly is a heritage interpreter?
Yeah, so it's anybody who is interpreting like a natural resource, or like, so think of it like your park rangers, things like that. It is starting to break into zoos a lot more, but it's anything that's like the heritage of the history of America, of the world around you, or anything. And so, like I said, there's a lot of science that went on behind it. If you guys, I mean, I have a plethora of books, but Freeman Tilden is one of the, or Tilden Freeman is one of the first ones that kind of started honing in on like, this is how, if we're going to teach people about national parks, this is probably what we should do to make it. I mean, in a way, you have to have that entertainment factor. Like, even though I said, yeah, zoos aren't entertaining, we as the humans need to be entertaining. The animals aren't there for entertainment, but we can make everything that the human is going through, that needs to be entertaining. And so, because whenever you learn, you set things up in a way that just does feels natural. And so, again, national parks, that's really, they're all pretty much certified interpreters. And so Laura is a certified, there's a few different levels. I just know I'm a heritage interpreter, and I know I'm like one of 100, 120 in the US that are certified at that level. So it takes a little bit more work to be involved at that level, but um, it's worth it because, again, you get into the human psychology side of things too.
Yeah, it makes you a more effective science communicator, it sounds.
And intentional too. I mean, and making sure. And Laura, I mean, it's easy to go off on a tangent. It is, and it's fun, and it's relaxing for somebody that has ADHD to go down those rabbit holes because, like, sweet dopamine, dopamine, dopamine,
Yep.
dopamine. It's amazing, but
That
but
feels like our stream too. It's just rabbit holing all over the
yeah,
place.
and that's great, and that's great. And Laura and I definitely, you guys listen to the podcast. I mean, we definitely go down some of these tangents. Like I brought up the ugly baby episode. If there are two episodes, I would say if there are two episodes that you guys should listen to. We don't have video for these two because these both were a while ago. But listen to the "Could You Fight That" episode, because you'll definitely see the personality difference between Laura and I. And then listen to the ugly animal baby episode. And whenever we talk about the Tasmanian devils in that thing, that is the part that still kills me every single time. And so, again, it's like, yeah, we can go down these like really funny tangents. And in that tangent, talking about the Tasmanian devil, Laura's talking about how, they're a marsupial. And so, whenever they give birth, it's like tons of little ones, but they only have like so many nipples. I think it's like 4 or 6 nipples. And so, but they'll give birth to like hundreds of like teeny tiny little babies. And then it's just like a race. And then whoever fuses onto that nipple, they win. Everything else is just going to die off. Like you're just gone. And so, again, so we're talking about all the science and everything. I was like, man, imagine if like humans had to do that. And then we just went off on this rabbit hole of like, imagine like you be walking through a store with like just dead like limp baby just hanging off of you because that's how they're growing and living, and you're just like whacking stuff off of shelves, and like Laura's like the modified clothing you'd have to have. And we just go off on these like funny tangents, and then we eventually circle back around to being like, okay, after we catch our breath from laughing so hard, now let's keep talking about the Tasmanian devil. So we definitely kind of go off on those tangents when our brains go there. But at the same time, it's like we try to, at least one of us will normally snap out of it and then bring the other one back to be like, all right, all right, all right, science, science, science. So
It's reset, reset. Let's bring it back.
yeah, yeah.
I do love the image though of like the different types of clothing we need in
Listen,
fighting
I'm
babies.
telling you, listen to that episode with the Tasmanian devil part. I still die laughing. Like, again, that's one of the ones, just tears in my eyes every time, because I'm like, this is so ridiculous, and people are listening to this. Like, it's not just Laura and I just being absurd. Like, it is, but it's a lot of fun.
It really paints a beautiful visual of what's going on in the animals world, right? And
No, right?
it makes it so that you like remember it, right? Like
Yes.
the image now of like fighting human children over nipples is now going to be
Yeah,
linked in
right.
for me for Tasmanian
Right.
devils, and it'd be like, wow, well
Right.
now I know that that
Right.
fact.
Right.
Um, so Katie, I could honestly talk to you for another 3 hours. I feel like that
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
this is an absolute blast, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if if you have to go, I want to maybe two more questions if we're able to get in, if
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
okay
yeah.
with
We'll do
you.
a couple more questions. Yeah, absolutely.
And then we'd love to have you back on at some point because
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
absolutely amazing. We had a question from the chat of, was there an animal or an animal experience where you really connected with a particular animal? What was it and why?
So I had a boyfriend in the form of a great horned owl at the last zoo I was at. So he was a rehab bird. So a lot of the birds of prey that we worked with were all rehabs. And so for some reason, they were taken to a rehab center for a broken wing, whatever. And then they were brought to the zoo if they couldn't be re-released. And they had a fairly good temperament. How this poor guy, his name was Lincoln, ended up at the zoo, we don't know, because he just had a really bad attitude. And birds are pretty picky. They either like you or they hate you. And if you guys know anything about great horned owls, the strength in their talons and their feet is about the same as a lion's jaw. So it's strong. And so even if you're having them on a glove, he gets mad. He would like look down and look at you and then just like squeeze your arm and like stomp his little feet and like grip his talons into your arm. And it was just so bad. Which again is why it's like so important for proper training, because if one of those goes into your arm, it is not fun. I've seen it happen, not fun at all. Definitely hurts. But so for whatever reason, birds, because again, it's a lot of them mate for life and things. Lincoln just hated everybody. And when I was starting to train with him and work with him, I'm like, man, this dude's pretty cool. Like, I think he's just like, yeah, he's kind of, bitter at everybody, but he doesn't seem too bad with me. And so like I would go grab him for programs, and I started taking him out. Like if a school said, yeah, we want, something in, bigger bird, I was like, I'll go grab Lincoln. And so I just put a lot of time into working with him, to the point where like as soon as I would open up the gate, he would start hooting for me, and then he would start getting pissed off at everybody else. And so like he just wanted me to like starting to come up and hold him and stuff. And so I was like, okay. And so I would be ended up taking out Lincoln as much as I absolutely could. And then when I left, when I left that zoo, he definitely was not happy at all about that situation. But I mean, again, it's a bird. They'll just like in the wild, they'll find a new mate. But he would try to bring me sticks. He was such a jerk, and I have to emphasize that, such a jerk to so many people. But like if there was like something around and I would go to grab him for a program, he would like bring me a stick or like bring me anything that he could to be like if they were eating. And he had like leftover like chunks of mice or chicks or whatever they were having that day. Bop, there's like it's like a ground beef essentially for them. He would like bring me chunks of that, or like one time he coughed up a pellet. They have all the leftover bones and everything, and he brought me his pellet. And I'm like, thanks, taking this like soggy, gross little pellet with all these like I guess I could pick through here and see what you were eating, but yeah, so that was definitely like as soon as he would see me, he would start calling for me. And as soon as I would come around, like whenever we had to, every once in a while we'd have to, trim up their beaks and their talons and stuff, because they can't like, break stuff down and, grind it down like they do in the wild. And so you have to catch them up and literally put them under your arms and then hold their feet out. And so whenever they had to catch up Lincoln, it was like over the radio, Katie, can you come up here? Cause we got to catch up Lincoln. I'm like, on my way. Grab him up, and then he was like literally getting his like with a little like sander, just like you do a dog, like doing his talons. He's just in my arm with his head back on my chest, just falling asleep, like just like happy little bird. And he was not that way with like anybody else. He was like, I'm going to murder you and I'm going to be happy about it. And then I would come up, he's like, hey, it was all great. So That was definitely the best one was just Lincoln and his love of me, and it was definitely mutual too. He was a pretty cool bird.
That's really, really sweet and really cool. Did you have a dream animal that you always wanted to work on and finally got to be able to interact with, or is there still one dream animal that you'd love to interact with one day?
I think it definitely changes. I definitely want to see orangs in the wild to some sort. And then when I was in Australia, I did some research and spent some time in Australia doing rainforest research. And when I was over there, we went out to the Barrier Reef, and I got to see like humpback whales and everything. And that for me was definitely like a checklist, because until you're like that close to like a humpback whale, there's just something different about them. It's like almost like an eerie, like they know that we know that they're cool kind of vibe. Um, and again, it's like it's just a weird connection whenever they're around. That there is just something is different there. If you talk to anybody who works with elephants within zoos, it's the same kind of vibe. Like anytime we would have an emergency in any zoos I had worked in, any sort of emergency or any bad situation that was going on, if the elephants are trumpeting, something's going down. And so if the elephants are trumpeting because it was like a good thing, they were getting a new, enrichment or something for the day, their keepers would go over the radio and be like, hey, we're about to give you like the elephants enrichment. So if you hear them trumpeting, we're all good, because we all know, and it's pretty universal within zoos, like if the elephants are trumpeting, like something's going down, because they just pick up on that bad, for lack of better terms, that bad energy. And whales are definitely the same way. So that was cool. But again, I'm a curious person. Gosh, as far as bucket list items or bucket list animals, there's a list. I mean, you could take me anywhere and I'd be like, sweet, like I bird outside. And like, so everything to me is fascinating, and I love it. So it's hard for me to see an animal in the wild, even, down the road, whatever, hiking, and me not get excited about it and tell anybody who's around and listening all the facts I know about it. So my friends that aren't into animals absolutely love having me on hikes. Most of the time they do, but it's normally like, hey, here's this snake. They're all like, get away from me. I'm like, but it's really cool though. So I'm still that kid for sure.
I love that, like, and then it's one of those things that you hope you never lose, because that's what also like really like
Yep.
I hope what's coming across the chat too is your excitement is infectious.
Yeah.
And like that's the absolute best kind of person to have a science communicator. Like you can get
Yeah.
everyone jazzed about like you
Oh
said, even
yeah.
like the ugliest baby animal, right? But
Yes.
I was like, oh my, I
Yeah.
want to learn about the ugliest baby animal.
You
Like,
really should listen to that episode. And I'm not just saying that because it's Laura and I. Again, sometimes I go back and I listen to these episodes. And again, Laura and I are trained professionals, but whenever you're so close to your work all the time, it's hard to step back and be like, hey, we actually did like a really good job. And so sometimes I'll just go back and I'll listen to random episodes, or somebody will, give me a call, shoot me a text, a message, whatever, and be like, hey, I really liked this episode. And it'll be one we did like 2, 3 years ago. And I'll go back and listen to it to answer a question or whatever, and I'll be like, man, that was really funny, or that was really good, or and so it's definitely definitely go back and listen to that ugly animal baby episode, because there's way more in that episode than just the ugly Tasmanian maggot babies using the nipples for sure.
I'm gonna have to look up images of this too now. I'm like,
Yeah,
I have to
it's
see what this looks
terrifying.
like.
Yes.
So, Katie, one question we've been asking all of our guests, because it is Women's History Month
Mhm.
and we've been celebrating incredible women in STEM, such as yourself, and like, my God, like your journey. I think we only scratched the surface, honestly,
Oh
right? Like
yeah.
volunteering at
Yeah.
zoos, like the degrees that you get, the lab work that you've been doing, the training you have in like animals, human psychology. Like, it is an incredible journey that I hope we'll be able to get you back on and talk more about.
Yeah, absolutely.
But one question we've been asking everyone is, what does it mean to you to be a woman in STEM and to be someone that women can look up to in the sciences?
It's cool, and it's definitely a privilege. Like when I was going through, I've had a lot of amazing role models. First, let me start there. Like Dr. Lucas at Cleveland Zoo. She again, it's that balance of having, because I feel like oftentimes with the generations before me, they were a lot rougher around the edges, because they truly had to fight to get to where they did. And it's like we still have to fight, but we don't have to be quite as rough around the edges, because they laid so much groundwork for us to, start to get there. At least somewhat easier. We just kind of face a little bit of different challenges. And so Dr. Lucas, that she was a great mentor. And then even whenever I was getting my master's degree in park and resource management, I had a professor there that was young and she was just as passionate and energetic and stuff too. And so it's just seeing all these people around me. And I know too, like I can reach out to any of these women to be like, hey, I have this question, or have you ever come across this situation? And it's definitely like I don't know, like a binding feeling for all of us because we've all kind of been through there. We've all had the people on social media and stuff, especially. And I mean, that's anybody, but I feel like it's really targeted to women that, no, you don't know what you're talking about kind of thing. And it's like, bro, I have like degrees and 20 years of experience in this stuff. And that's not even counting like my childhood of like ADHD nerd Katie, just absorbing everything. Like, I'm 36. I kind of have 36 years of experience in this, dude. Like, don't come at me. Like, and so it's definitely hard, but it's also great because then you can reach out to these other women to be like, hey, I'm feeling really just, frustrated about this situation. Have you been here or how did you handle this and stuff? And they can kind of bounce ideas and give you advice too. And so, but then again, it's going back to like that young listener that Laura and I have. And again, it's already seeing, and I've had quite a few of those instances in my career where I've seen like that spark of curiosity light up in a kid. And that truly keeps me going where I'm just like, boom, like I'm doing it. Cause I didn't always have that. Like we had this, Steve Irwin, that was so far away and it was a distance thing. And so definitely whenever I have like even those in-person interactions and I see that spark of a kid that's like, aha, I get it, or I understand it now, or oh, hey, that's really cool. Like that definitely lasts and keeps me going. So I definitely don't, I don't take it lightly. I understand like the responsibility and stuff that, that I carry because being a woman in science, but it's a great privilege and it's really cool. And just being able to have fun and pass that curiosity and spark curiosity in kids. I mean, it's a lot of fun.
And adults too, I feel like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
'cause like you said, like, you've had the human psyche that you've had to learn everything from kids to
Yep.
adults, and honestly, I think on behalf of our whole community, thank you for doing what you do because it is
Yeah.
critical in terms of like in conservation efforts and saving
Absolutely. Yeah.
species and just saving the planet. Like people like you are the front lines that are going to make that difference. And I would want to go with no one else to battle but you. Like you have inspired us to like also like I'll pick up a sword next to her. That's fine. Let's go.
Heck yes. Yes.
So Katie, just any like from you, any parting words we've put into the chat and we'll put into any like recordings as well, like the YouTube page and the podcast link.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely. Yeah.
please let us know like what else that you would like to promote, anything you have upcoming. The floor is yours.
Yeah, no, Laura and I have a lot of really cool stuff planned coming up. We're going to be we're at the end of season 11 right now. And we always take a break. It's not a break. We have like mini sodes in that break, but it gives us a little bit of time to relax. And then we're going to be starting season 12 here in a few weeks coming up. So make sure you guys stay tuned and check out all of our pages and social media and stuff because we have some surprises. We have a new theme song that I'm stoked about. But then we have some more guests and everything that are coming up that again, it's just the people we get to talk to in this community through the podcasting gives us that platform. So make sure you guys just follow along with all that stuff. And again, reach out to us and talk to us. Laura and I try to, answer any comments, especially on YouTube. I'm constantly on there answering comments and things like that. So yeah, just interact with us, reach out to us. And again, if anybody ever has like, hey, you guys should talk about this because it would be really cool. We constantly like my son the other day was like, hey, mom, you need to talk about this. Have you talked about this on the podcast yet? I'm like, no, dude, that's a great idea. And so we're going to put it in the next season. So anybody who has ideas or anything like that, always send them our way.
I'll throw a pitch for fruit flies, leaf cutter ants, and planarians between me and my wife.
Heck yeah. No, heck yeah. We haven't really we've talked about fruit flies and briefly we mentioned it in space. We just did this past season. We did a cosmic critter like little mini series throughout the season. So we mentioned it a few times. We'll definitely have you guys on because yeah, we haven't talked about any of that. So
Yeah, there's been
we'll definitely have you guys
ants in
on.
space too. Like it's kind of wild when you
Yes.
start like moving them back and forth and figuring out not just behavior but chromosome structure, and there's just like
Yeah.
mind-boggling stuff that happens. And then the for those we've linked it again in the chat, but the podcast is that Spotify, Apple,
Yeah,
iTunes,
pretty much.
everywhere that
Yeah.
people can find
Yeah,
it.
pretty much every place.
If folks wanted to support you directly, do y'all have like a Patreon or
We
something
do
that?
have a Patreon. Yeah, we
Okay.
do have a Patreon, so you can go over there and support us. We're kind of shifting gears on that Patreon. just because we want to be able to make it a little bit more equitable for folks and make it a little bit more streamlined and effortless for us. But that's, I mean, as you know, like this stuff costs money to do all this stuff. I mean, there's the hosting fees, everything like that. So it definitely costs money to keep us going.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing what you do, and you are damn good at it.
Thank you, thank you. I
Katie,
enjoy it.
thank you again for your time and just all that you do in your conservation work. Like that is, it's like I said, I want you on the front lines of it. You're incredible, and for sharing your story and just being an
Yeah,
inspirational
absolutely.
woman in science.
Yeah, well,
Um,
thank you guys for having us on. Thanks for all the questions and listening. Like I said, have more questions. Hunt us down on social media. That's the great thing and the horrible thing about social media nowadays is you can find almost anyone. So hunt us down and ask questions and reach out to us for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Katie, and we'll talk to you
Thank you
soon.
guys. All right, bye.
That was our conversation with Katie Rice. You can find links to all of her social media accounts in the show notes.